Okay, financial update, February 2025. Uh-oh. Just kidding. Not uh-oh. Not uh-oh. Okay? We're taking a short break from our Samuel series that we started 2-3 weeks ago and talking about finances. So this is a good time. Take out your notes app on your phone. If you have paper or pen, pull that out too. Really good to jot down some questions. Jot down something that sticks out to you, something that encourages you, something that confuses you. And if you're someone who, I totally get it, like I remember in my church growing up when we'd have the Sunday, I can't remember how often we did this, where we'd kind of talk about giving and finances and stuff, I'd be like, oh man. But what's really important to think of that, just like reading God's word and doing a deep study of 1st and 2nd Samuel, which we will continue doing next week, is just as important as followers of Jesus as thinking about, caring about finances and giving. In fact, it's one of the things that so many of Jesus' parables revolve around giving. So this idea of we're not really taking a break from something that's important to our discipleship. This is very important to our discipleship, and it's something that matters to all of us. So this is a team deal. So first, let's do the next slide. We just want to say thank you because there's a core group of you all who give very consistently, both in terms of just your dollars and recurring gifts or as often as you can, and just time. Like our church depends heavily on a large number of volunteers. Our coffee team, our sound team, our communion team, our AV stuff and the slides, our kids ministry, our worship team, we have people, small group leaders, people who preach up here who aren't just Leslie and I who are volunteering to do that. So there's so much thank you to say to you in our community. Even if you've only been here for a little bit, there's a good chance we've tried to pull you in to do something like sharing a communion thought on Sunday. And so you're part of this thank you too. It's not just a tiny little group. So, and also when we've done our special contribution asks, we've done about 3 of these in the past year and a half. 2 of them have been for our church planting fund, but we did one as well, or we've done a couple that are in the realm of benevolence, like trying to get together school supplies for the Martin Luther King Rec Center for the kids that couldn't afford school supplies, or helping with things for Jess and Vianette's school. We'll talk about those later, but y'all have responded really well to these things when we let y'all know about a need and we say, hey guys, could we pull together and help with this? Y'all have responded really well to those. So we just want to say thank you for being people who just are kingdom-minded in that way and really respond quickly. So next slide. What's all this talk about giving? It's giving desperate. Did I use that right? Okay, next slide. I wouldn't say desperate, but we've been talking about giving a lot. We've been kind of ramping up to this. You may have noticed our little section in our liturgy every single week. We've been emphasizing the giving portion a little bit more lately. So all this talk about giving really isn't desperate, but it's as a church, we are reliant on you all together, all of us. Together we decide with God's money what we can do, what we can keep doing as a church community, what we could start doing, and how we can do it. As you probably know, most things that need to be done cost money in some way, even the things that we wish didn't, even just being able to meet in a place on a Sunday morning, for instance, costs money. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But these updates don't have to seem daunting at all. I don't want you to feel that way at all, or even boring or like a lecture, because instead it can feel like a team huddle up. This is our church, and how did last year go? How did we end up deciding, what did we end up deciding to do with God's money? Was that how we wanted it to go? Did it go slightly differently than we expected? What do we want to do together as a church? And how do we want to accomplish that? And how do we want to resource these things that are important to our church community together that we want to make sure happen? And how can we use God's resources to make sure those things happen? Does that make sense? Yeah. Next slide, please. Giving around here, the way we talk about this, I just want to remind you, is coming together to invest God's resources in order to sustain and increase making and maturing disciples who love, serve, and share Jesus. That is our mission as a church. And being a place where hearts are turned to God and lives are changed. That's our vision as a church. So that's what giving's about here. Anything that doesn't feed into those things is not something we should be devoting God's resources to or asking you to give God's resources to. And you'll see in a bit the way our budget works and how there's no excess, no fluff really. It's all about trying to do things that help our mission and our vision, and that's something that really is exciting and really matters a lot to God. We could not, there's so many aspects of making and maturing disciples who love, serve, and share Jesus, being a place where hearts are turned to God and lives are changed, that do just cost something, but that's so important, and it's something that couldn't be more crucial to our very existence as the body of Christ, right? Making and maturing other disciples, helping people's lives be changed and turned toward God. So that's what's important about this whole deal. And I'll hand it to Leslie for the next few.
Okay, so I'm going to walk you through what our monthly budget looks like, because we want you guys to know where the money you give is going. We also want more eyes on this so that if you look at something and you say, hey, I have an idea about that, you can give that to us. So please don't tune out on this part. So our monthly expenses are $9,850 altogether, and salaries are $6,615, and you can see what Josh and I make. Ronnie Worsham is the person that started the Family of Churches, if you're not familiar with that name. And the Family of Churches each pitch in to do his salary, to make up his salary, but the benefit we get back from that is huge. The wisdom and experience, the love for Jesus that Ronnie has, the love for each of our churches is just, we can't replace that. So that's a big bargain, and that's an important thing. And then on rent, we have $2,083. And then on leadership development programs, materials, we spend about $700, and on missions, we do about $467. So you can look at this, and we're going to break it down a little bit more, but one thing I want you to see is this is really the bare minimum of what we can do. So when we say our budget is $98.50, that means it's like $98.50 just to do normal things that keep us functioning as a church. There's not a whole lot we could remove out of that. But there are things we could add to that if we give more as a group. The next slide is just a breakdown of salaries only. And so I love that you can just look at how cheap we get Ronnie Worsham compared to me and Joshua. You might want to look at putting him on full-time staff. That might help. And he legally has to do whatever we tell him to. And then the next slide is rent only. And so this is 21% of our total budget. And the cost breakdown on here is per week. So per week, we spend $280 on this room. We pay the building attendant $70, which is $20 an hour. We pay, the big kids room is $87.50, the pre-K kids room is $75, and the baby room is $50. So if we were gonna try and save on rent, we would be cutting out one of these things. The other thing I want to make note of here is that this doesn't reflect, because we were looking at 2024, it doesn't reflect how much it actually cost us per week, because we aren't here every Sunday throughout the whole year. So there are some Sundays that we're not here, and one of the great things about meeting at the senior center is that if we let them know ahead of time, then we don't have to pay for that Sunday. That's not the case a lot of places, so that's a really big benefit. And then we're always looking. We're always looking for different places we could meet and save money, but this is the cheapest we've been able to find up until now. And there was no increase in price this year, which was a huge blessing. Programs, materials, and leadership development makes up about 7% of our budget. So insurance is liability and a little bit of coverage for equipment. And there was I think it was a $50 a year increase this year. So if any of you have been shopping homeowners, and if yours only increases $50 this year, you know what a big deal that is, that we were able to do that. And then events are things like when we do the all-church swim party, every church kicks in money for that. When we did our swim party, DNC paid the total of that. We didn't do an entry fee or anything. When we do our men's and women's events, it comes out of this particular fund. And things like potlucks, like we buy all of the paper goods and things like that. So it's just a variety of things there that make up that budget. What this does not reflect is how many of our ministry leaders use their own money to buy things and just never turn their receipts in. And they're very generous that way, and we appreciate that. And then our missions budget, that makes up our benevolence, and it also makes up Metro Auto. And then also Kristen Harris is on staff in Bellingham. I can't remember which campus, but one of the campuses up there, and she used to be a part of Focus in Denton, and so we've supported her for ever since she's been up there. So those are the things that make that up. We could make the case that everything we do is missions, but these are the specific areas that we are supporting. And the more, again, if you want to see this area go up, then our giving needs to go up to reflect that. And then just some benevolence examples. I'm going to let Josh take that first one.
Yeah, some of the things we've been able to do at the Martin Luther King Rec Center have been so fun and so cool. Like I mentioned earlier, y'all responding to special contribution about just school supplies. So many people in the orbit of that rec center, which is just, we used to meet there as a church, and our first regular meeting place when we started meeting every week was there for the first 2 or 3 years of our church existing. And they're just a really cool hub in the community over there for tons of things, great events and meeting needs. And they were telling us about, they've done the school supplies drive about every year, but that it's been getting worse just with the fact that, costs have gone up, inflation, that kind of stuff. But they've been seeing a lot more kids just needing school supplies and not being able to get, even a third of the list of whatever their school releases. And so it's really cool that they get to do that, and they just put a call out to a bunch of different churches and different groups in the city to, hey, would y'all help us with this? And it's so nice knowing that it's going directly to people who really need it, and that the MLK Rec Center is there in these people's lives all the time. And so it's just really cool to come alongside the things that they're doing and supporting it, and getting to know their staff, and just having had a relationship with them over the years has been really sweet. And so that's an area where God really is using what we're doing and what other churches are doing and other ministries, and what the MLK Rec Center is doing when they put those things on. We also have helped with their events like the Breakfast with the Grinch and Santa, and we end up we've accidentally slowly taken over that event a little, where we provide the Santa and both Grinches, and we make all of the food in the morning. And so many people love that event, are just so excited to get to, hang out with Santa. And then for some reason, the line to hang out with the Grinches is much longer. I'm not really sure what's going on there, but
it's frightening.
But we're providing those characters regardless of which one they choose to hang out with, you know what I'm saying? And just things like that are really sweet, and you can see on the kids' faces, but also on the MLK staff, they're just always wow, thank y'all so much for helping with this. Look at how special this is to people, So I just wanted to give y'all a couple of details there on that.
Yeah, and on Jess and Vianette's schools, teachers have always paid a lot of money out of their own pocket to provide for their classrooms. But this last year in particular in the Denton School District, the funds were cut drastically, and teachers have had to provide a lot more. And teachers that are at the lowest income schools can't do things like have everybody bring so much money for a field trip. These are students that are getting free and reduced lunch, and if they don't have money for that, they don't have money to go on a field trip. And so at Jess's school, that was true, and we were able to pay for their field trip that they were going on, the buses for that, which was the major expense. And then at Vianette's school, she was getting together snacks for her students to take home over the Christmas break. So at our women's event, we had people bring specific things for those. And then I also bought quite a bit of stuff that came from the church benevolence fund as well to kick in for that. And so that was just a way that we could bless some of the kids and teachers in our community.
And y'all have heard us talk quite a bit about Metro Auto Ministry. That's a ministry that really was just part of our benevolence here at our church for a while, and just grew too big. But it's a ministry that spun off onto its sort of its own thing that we still support as a church, that helps people who are low income, who need car repairs or need help even buying a car in the first place. and need zero interest loans and can't get a loan anywhere that's not crazy high interest, or they can't get one at all. And so that's a huge need in our area. You've probably noticed that the DFW area basically expects you to have a car. If you are trying to get to a job, if you've got a kid or 2 or 3 and trying to take them to school and stuff like that, or just be able to take them anywhere other than just where the bus will take them to and drop them off, it's just very hard. And so a lot of the people that we've been able to help through Metro Auto Ministry that Brad leads are people who the car repair or the car not existing in their life is a huge problem and keeps them from being able to get to a stable place as a family. And so, one little repair can completely stall a family out if they can't pay for that. And so it's an area that as soon as we started doing a little bit of that, word of mouth and a few other things, there's just such a huge need there. But a lot of the folks who Metro Auto Ministry is able to help just couldn't get help somewhere else. It's a really cool niche, honestly. And so every year that we help with that campaign and we ask God to give to that, and then we as a church also give to the matching funds for that, it's a really cool thing going on in our city, in our area. And there's just not a ton of other people doing the same thing. So it's cool to find a niche like that really makes a difference in people's lives. And so y'all's support to that and our support as a church has really helped that thing start in the first place and continue.
Yeah. And then one of the other things that we've done is people that need help finding shelter, particularly when the weather is really bad. We always first refer them to one of the shelters that's in Denton. But if there's an extenuating circumstance, then sometimes we're able to help with that. And Josh, who were you meeting with that night when you met that woman?
Oh, Johnny.
Yeah, Josh and Johnny were meeting before track one night, and they met a woman that was leaving an abusive situation. She only needed 2 nights, and then she was going to have another situation to get into. So we put her up in a hotel for 2 nights. Dawn had a coworker that had just moved here, had just gotten a job, was trying to get into an apartment, and we were able to help a little bit with that. And then we also had a student that got into a financial bind. Part of it had to do with having her car towed. And so we were able to step in and help her kind of get things together to be able to move forward. So those are just examples of some of the kinds of things that we get to do because you guys give to those things. And we just cannot tell you how thankful we are to be able to say, hey, we can help with this because there's a whole group of people that have given money that we can help with. So thank you for doing that. Okay, just some refreshers about how we do, about our church and about how we think about money. The first one is that we purposely don't have excess in our budget that can easily be trimmed. So we try and run lean so that we can use as little money as possible. So when you look at that slide where we had everything broken down, there's not a whole lot we can trim out of that doesn't cause us to do something extremely different in the way we operate. So could we meet if we didn't meet at the senior center? Yes, we could. We could divide up and meet in homes. We could meet at pavilions in the parks, but it would really change the way that we do Sunday morning church. So there's just not a lot to be trimmed out. The second one is that we give a larger portion toward our staff salaries, and our staff spend a large percentage of their time with people. It may not always be people from our church. Sometimes it's people that we've met in the community or people from another church or people that just need help in some area that their church doesn't provide. But we do spend a lot of time with people. And so we want to prioritize things and spending that gives us time to do relational ministry. And then we pay much less, like I told you when we looked at the rent, we pay much less in building and program costs than the average church does. And this is good, and it's on purpose. People ask us from time to time, are we ever going to own a church? Not unless God just drops one in our lap, because it just costs a lot of money to run a church and own a church. But to be able to rent is really a blessing that we can do that, and we can be mobile. And we can leave if we want to and go somewhere else if we grow too big for this. So that's one of the reasons that we fly that way.
Mm-hmm. And we don't currently have room to have a percentage devoted to savings, and that's not great. It doesn't help us replenish the emergency fund. We'll talk a bit about that in a little bit. And just there's not a lot of buffer, and that's not a great thing. I mean, obviously, you can imagine how from one week to the next being like, oh, never mind, senior center, we can't meet, please. Like, we don't have that money. That's not a good thing. We want to have that buffer so that we can keep doing things even as stuff fluctuates in terms of giving. The benevolence requests that come in often exceed our budget, and the list of things we gave a little bit ago often is more than what is just in our actual benevolence budget. Now, we're not saying we want people just to go give specifically to benevolence, but in general, if our giving was up, we could continue giving more, allocating more toward benevolence. And then the climate for church planting is just tough. I don't know if you've known about that or heard from friends at other churches and that kind of thing. But the idea of planting churches, our church is in its 10th year, and so we've made it quite a ways. But it is hard, and you're going into something that's not like a cash cow. It's not this like really cool like lucrative thing. Like, dude, get into church planting, bro, because that's some serious dough right there. You got crypto, you got software development, church planting, boom. Those are so good, you know what I'm saying? And we know of, just in our limited just connections, 4 different churches that have been planted since we were planted in this same area that are not still meeting, that don't exist anymore. And most of that was, there's a lot of differences, but some of those churches even had way more money as like a seed money to start with. So it doesn't really ensure that you're going to make it just by having money. There's so many factors in trying to plant churches, reach people, make immature disciples that just make it a hard climate. Churches are on decline, and the overall interest in it is a little less. And so we're venturing into something that's just hard. And I just think it's good to be reminded about that. Next slide, please. We're going to move into a couple of different things about our giving and our church itself. So this is kind of interesting. We've about 120 average weekly attendees. If you kind of added up all our small groups and all our different stuff, it'd be greater than that. But on a typical Sunday, that's about how many people are here. And it's about 55% non-college adults, 29% college students, 16% kids. We recalculated that multiple times. I was like, that doesn't seem right. So anyway, those kids better start giving, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So that's just good for you to know as we look at the next few numbers. Next slide, please. So we currently have 46 steady recurring gifts. I'm saying the word gifts because some of that's individuals and some of that's a couple. So that's the total number of recurring gifts we have each month that we can count on and expect on. And people from our church and from other churches. There's folks in our family of churches who are about 4 or 5 at least that I'm aware of that give to our church because they're like, I want to help sort of send Denton North and keep it existing, and I want it to keep existing where it's at. So they give to their church that they are at, and they also give some to our church to make sure that they are supporting what we're doing, and they want a church up here ministering to the folks in Denton. And I think that's really cool. That's one of those things that Leslie really pointed out to me that I had just kind of not really thought that much about. And I just think it's cool for y'all to know that there's mostly it's people here, but we have people around our family of churches who really believe in what God's doing in Denton and want to keep supporting it. Next slide. This is just a chance to remind you kind of the differences between giving through Tithely, which is on our website, and Venmo. We started doing the Venmo thing about 2 or 3 years ago. It's just so much more convenient for many of you, and we want to make things easy as much as we can. But just to remind you, because we get questions about this and we haven't mentioned it in a while, Venmo's kind of like dropping cash into a box. It's not easy to go send you like a receipt of your stuff, and of course Venmo doesn't have like a way of setting up recurring gifts. And so as much as we can, as much as you're able, kind of directing you the Tithely route, the thing on our website, let you set up a recurring gift and just let you kind of plan out in advance and commit to something. It's adjustable for sure, but it's super helpful on our side because we, instead of waiting toward the end of the month to see sort of what happened, we have a sense of, oh, here's what people are planning to do. Here's what people are planning to allocate and wanting to give, and we can make our plans based on that. So that's just something that's good to mention and for you to know about. Next slide, please. This is our average monthly giving. We've got some people who give specifically to benevolence, but then the bulk of that's to offering, which goes to all the things in our budget. And the total is $91.95 there. And so the next slide, please. You can see that when we tallied up everything from 2024, our budget average month to month was $98.50. So we have a shortfall right now of $654. This is the best shortfall we've ever had.
Yeah.
So just so you know, that is worth celebrating.
That is.
The last couple of times we've done this and we've calculated everything up, across a year, things change every single month, but our shortfall has been greater than that, which has meant we've eaten into our emergency fund, but it hasn't made us need to just stop meeting every Sunday or say no more events or anything like that. And so that's what's really good about having that buffer. But average giving went up slightly since the last time we gave this update, so thank you guys very much. And then also some of our expenses went down a little bit. Some of that's just kind of random and we didn't expect it and it wasn't on purpose, but a couple things didn't go up or some things went down. And so that actually helped to make that shortfall the smallest it's ever been since we've been doing these updates the past 3 years that I've been helping with them. So good on you. Next thing is the buffer, the emergency fund we're talking about, is currently sitting at $11,400. And if the current shortfall stays the same, that $650 stays the same, negative, we would deplete this in about 17 months, okay? And so that's how much of sort of a runway we have. If nothing changes at all, we would end up depleting that emergency fund in that many months. Leslie.
Okay, I want to say one more thing about that one. Because of the way that our giving comes in and our expenses go out, that emergency fund dropped to $4,000 at one point. And so that's not very much money, very much cushion for what we do as a church. So one of the reasons that having an emergency fund or a buffer is important is to keep us from going negative at some point because of the way things come in and go out. So giving groups, we're going to look at the different giving groups that we have in our church, and key givers is the first one. So we have 8 gifts, which a gift could be a single person, a gift could be a couple. We have 8 gifts that provide 42% of our giving or our budget. Which one is it? I can't remember.
Our budget.
Our budget. So these people are people that are giving above and beyond. They're really sacrificing. And really, when we look at increasing what we're giving, we're not talking to this group of people because they're already giving generously. And we just want to thank those people so much. Obviously, we couldn't do what we do without what you're giving. Also, if anyone from this group needed to adjust their giving, if someone lost a job, if they had to move to go to another church plant, it would really significantly affect our church. And so while we are very, very thankful for this, and we know that it was God's provision, it also is a little bit problematic in terms going forward. We really need to spread out our giving more. The second group is people who are consistent, who could look at increasing. And so we're not looking at what you're giving and saying, oh, you should increase your giving. What we mean by that is you're consistently giving, so the next step in being a generous giver is to look and see and pray and ask God, is there more I could be giving? And then the last group that we have are people who aren't yet giving. And so, again, this is a place where we would encourage you to pray, to ask God what you could do differently to be able to give some. Now, we know that most of the people that aren't yet giving to DNC may be giving other places, but we think that Scripture says, and we believe it's important, that we give to the church that we're a part of as well as those other places. It's not a perfect analogy, but it's kind of like if you had your family budget, but you looked at somebody else and decided to give to their budget instead without giving anything to your family budget. So if you're a part of the church, then you should be giving to support the church. That doesn't mean you shouldn't give anywhere else. It doesn't mean all your money should go here, but some of it should. So those are just some things to think about there. This isn't somebody else's church. Like, you can't look at those 8 gifts that are supporting us so highly and go, oh, this is their church. They can do that. I don't need to do anything. It's all of our church. Like, all of us can give something. We don't determine how much you need to give. God's going to help you determine that. And then what we give determines what we can do as a group. And I think that's really exciting. That's something that we can look forward to giving to, is just what could we do? Like, what could we do if we had more gifts coming in as a church? That's an exciting thing.
Next, we're going to talk about goals. This year, we only have 2 goals, and they're both really important. So the first goal is just correcting the shortfall. You can understand how that'd be really important to do first. We can't really move on to any other new exciting things until we are at least, meeting the needs of what it costs to just run our ministries as they stand right now. So that takes $654 a month to correct that. But one thing we want to do on the next slide is, as fun as it is to correct the shortfall, we want to move beyond that, to other exciting goals. But if we find ourselves in this shortfall, this has to be our first priority. So one of the things we want to do is try to jumpstart this with a special contribution in 2 weeks. And when we do special contributions, in this case, we're only giving y'all 2 weeks of heads up. It's really just an ask to say, hey, in the next 2 weeks, could you forego eating out a couple of times, forego grabbing a coffee somewhere a couple of times, and just pull together something that you can give to this fund to help us get closer on this goal and replenish that emergency fund, so that we can then, after that, move on to other goals like the next one, which is add a part-time staff person. This is something we want to do for a long time. We've gotten way more specific about it, though. We've had sort of I think in the past we had 4 goals, and this was one of them. But we wanted to have just 2 goals this time and really clearly outline this, that we've talked a lot about just the needs of our church and how much of a priority we put on relational ministry, spending time with people. You can imagine that just Leslie and I and a lot of our leaders who are doing ministry to the side of their jobs, how we have a limited amount of time, but a lot of people in our church we want to meet with, study with, help them grow in their faith, do leadership development material with, and just having 2 people on staff makes that super hard, as you can imagine. So we've wanted to add another person, specifically a woman, as the fact that we've had several leaders like Grant and Ryan who step up and take on a bunch of other stuff, and their schedules currently allow for that. We really want to add a female staff member to help Leslie in all of this stuff on the ladies' side of ministry, as well as a bunch of other things across all aspects of our church that would be really helpful. We just haven't been able to do that yet. It's a need we've identified, we'd love to do, and it would really benefit you all a lot for us to have more people whose their biggest priority is investing in you, spending time with you, helping you develop in your faith. And so that's something that we are excited about, and we'd love to move beyond the shortfall kind of stuff to be able to think about these kinds of goals, adding more staff members, doing different kinds of things in terms of giving to other things in missions, just various things we could get ideas from you all about and get excited about once we get past the shortfall thing. So this adding a part-time staff person, we said part-time because at least that's a little easier to get to. If something happened like crazy and we could just add somebody full-time tomorrow, we would try to make that happen. We would call some people up and try to get them to quit their jobs. So the next slide is just what that looks like to accomplish if we were just starting from scratch and we'd already done the shortfall situation. It would take 15 donors, about $100 a month to make that happen. As you can tell, that's simple math. Or just recurring donors across all amounts, just increasing by 18%. That one doesn't seem nearly as crazy to do, or some combination of the two is how we would accomplish that. So just those 2 goals is what we have for this year.
Okay, next slide. So if you have any questions, do not sit and wonder. You can use this QR code to send us your questions, and we'll be happy to get back to you on that. And then we're going to give you a little assignment, but I want you to listen to the whole thing first, and then I'll go back and tell you what it is you need to do right now. So we're going to take 3 minutes and find a time to discuss your giving with a friend or with your spouse. Okay, so we're not going to take 3 minutes to do that right now. We're going to take 3 minutes to find a time to do that. So going to somebody in here, talking to your spouse, coming up with when you're going to talk about that. And then one of the things that we want you to do during that time is to brainstorm creative ideas on how to grow in generosity and how to stretch money further. If you don't have someone available that you feel comfortable getting with to talk about your giving, then again, you can scan the QR code and we'll pair you up with one of our leaders that would be great to brainstorm with. And then questions for that conversation would look something like this, like what is our next step in giving? If we're not giving to the church and or other ministries we're a part of, why aren't we? Could we free up money by simply spending less on less important things? Do we have any low-hanging fruit for increasing income that we could give? For example, renegotiating salary, a side job, dog sitting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are tons of things out there. Could we free up money for giving through a creative lifestyle change? So renting out a room, becoming a one-car household instead of two, things like that. So those are some places you can start your conversation and talk about what giving looks like for you. And then I just want to, before we transition into the next part, I just wanted to remind you that the scripture talks a lot about giving. One of the ones that came to mind this morning was just Jesus telling us to store up treasure in heaven. It is super easy to get sidetracked by treasure we can have here on earth. Kurt and I went to Colorado for our 35th anniversary this last year, and ever since we went on that trip, I get stuff about travel on my feeds all the time, and I look at them and I go, oh gosh, it would be so fun to go there, and it would be so fun to go there. And it's so easy to get sidetracked and forget that my purpose is to use God's money the way He is asking me to use it. And so joining God in the work He's doing, looking around and seeing what He's doing and joining Him in that. But I would say first and foremost that it's a way to worship and honor God with everything we have. Before it is supporting the church, it is a gift to God. It is honoring Him because we're not our own. We were bought with a price. And so one of the things you might want to do as you're talking about giving this week is just looking at all the places that the Bible talks about giving. So the next thing we're going to do.
I can do that. So you can get a sense of how a lot of this has been very information heavy. And that's one of the problems about that is the Bible talks so much about giving and generosity. And so this shouldn't really just be only information. We should also, open up the Word of God and have a chance to hear from it and do something less about our brains and looking at numbers and more about our hearts. And so we've asked some folks in our community who have a lot of thoughts about giving, God's really grown them in this area, and they really feel passionately about it, who want to just share some thoughts and encouragements with our church community. And so our first one's going to be Brad, who got sick and is going to do his on video. And so we can cue that up now, and then we'll have a couple others after him.
Hey guys, my name is Brad, and I own a couple small businesses in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Also, I'm the director of a nonprofit that helps people get cars and car repairs. I already did this video once, and it was like perfect, but I realized all I had done was take a picture of myself. So shoot, let's try again to have the inspiration that I had the first time. What I think really challenges and impacts me about giving and generosity is the story of Israel going back to the land after being exiled by Assyria, which gets taken over by Babylon. And the Babylonian king Cyrus lets them go back into their land, which is kind of crazy. You don't generally let people who you've conquered go back to build the very central place, the temple of their worship. And a few people go back, and it's been a couple months, and Haggai comes to them and says, hey, why aren't you guys rebuilding the temple? This is the whole purpose for you coming back here. And they say, well, it's just not time. And Haggai says, oh, so it is a time, though, for you to rebuild your own houses and make them splendid, but let the temple stay in, ruins and desolation. And so it's kind of an aha moment, and the people repent, and it's a really neat story. Temple still never gets back to its former glory, but I think it's a lesson for us that we spend so much of our time building our own kingdoms, our jobs, our houses, our cars, our leisure activities, and are we really doing what is necessary to build the temple, which we can see in a lot of ways, whether it's the church community, our city, the whole earth. but the temple being the place where God can meet people, the place where we know people meet God and experience him, whether that's me paying for a missionary or supporting a staff person, giving to the poor, or just generally investing in my community to make sure that people have opportunities directly to experience God's love and care for them. And that's often a side thought for me, and not the main thought in my life. And so it's so challenging to remind myself, to ask myself, am I here building my own house and it's looking great and beautiful while the temple of the Lord lays in ruins? Or am I really building the temple of God and making sure that that's the place that people can experience God, know him, and where most of my investments are? So I challenge you that. Thanks for letting me share.
Hello. This one? Hi. When Josh was like, we had people who wanted to share, I'm like, I was asked to share. I'm not sure if I'm the most generous person, but okay. It was cool to hear the thoughts before me because I think a lot of what I had to say echo a lot of what Leslie said and what Brad just shared too. So the title of my talk was Generous Because He Was First Generous. I'm going to be talking today about the opportunity to be worshipful of God by being generous in response. I'm doing the Bible recap, and something I've been reminded of is how God remembers even the smallest people. I just finished Leviticus, and this verse stuck out to me. I want you to listen and try to capture God's heart for the community when commanding this from his people. Leviticus 23:22. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Leave them for the poor and for the foreigner residing among you. I am the Lord your God. If the people listened to him, it meant their faith was in him to continue to provide. They didn't have to penny pinch one another. Their ability to follow him in this way was a major act of worship because it showed where their true sense of security lied. I want to share this quote from C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity, and buckle up, it's a doozy. I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare. In other words, if our expenditures on comforts, luxuries, amusements, etc., is up to the standard common among those with the same income as our own, we're probably giving away too little. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say that they are too small. There ought to be things we should like to do and cannot do because our charitable expenditure excludes them. So just think about your life. Look around your home, your driveway, your calendar, your credit card statement. Does the way you spend echo God's heart of giving? Something I had to confess to Ricardo was the feeling of always being excited for the future or needing the bigger, better thing. The day we would move into our dream house, the day I get the bigger SUV with a third row, the excitement of or hopes of travel. The funny lie that our credit culture wants you to believe is that if you have more money, you can have the nicer, bigger, better thing. But what you don't see is once you obtain those things is you now need more to catch up. I have to ask myself, what if I don't get the rug that I want, or the remodel I've been saving to Pinterest, or the fancy vacation in Europe for 2 weeks? The scary question that lurks in the background is, what am I truly worshiping? What does all the things I spend brain power and money show me about where my true treasure is? What do any of these things give me in return? Stability, worth, joy? Are any of these things evil or bad? Of course not. But I don't think any of us in middle-class America in Denton, Texas, with iPhones in our back pocket are in danger of spending too little on ourselves. What if denying the things I want actually lead to a fuller life? What if God is a good father that knows what I truly need? What if every time we made a purchase on Amazon or went to Target, we first considered how to praise God with our money and how to love those around us by being exceedingly generous rather than just giving the small amount out of our excess, but giving in a way that is inconvenient for us? What if these things lead to true contentment and joy? If you said no to some things, what were the things you could say yes to? Yes to giving more to church, yes to helping with Metro Auto Ministry, yes to paying for someone's groceries or rent. Giving is so fulfilling and can be so creative. Okay, that's all I have.
There we go. Good morning, church. I also didn't volunteer. I was asked. I think it was you get asked and then you, I want to do it after that. After being asked. But good morning, church. For those who don't know me, my name is Manny Simide. I've been attending Denton North Church for about 6 years now, and I've been a part of the whole family of churches a little bit longer than that. I started at UTD Focus and went to the Northeast Church in Garland, but then moved here to Denton whenever I got married. This church is my home. Its people are my family, and I thank God for steering my life in such a way that led me here to plant my roots and build a life here. Throughout my life, I've moved many times and didn't stay in one place for very long, and struggled to find a place that was truly my home, and I'm grateful to call Denton and DNC my home now. But this letter isn't about me. This is about us as a church. And still, I want to share that, like many of you, I struggle with how I give my money away. One moment, I'm impulsively buying something on Amazon that I probably don't need. And the next, I'm wrestling with questions about owning a home, or if I can live smaller to free up more money for generosity. If you're like me, you might find yourself torn between greed and generosity. My prayer is that God will continue to grow us in generosity because he is so faithfully generous to us. But generosity can go beyond money. We kind of talked about that a little bit with our time and stuff. You can be generous with your time by spending a weeknight after work with someone who really needs a friendship. You can be generous with your resources. Go above and beyond sharing food with your small group for your Sabbath meals. You can be generous with your labor, lending a hand and your back to that family that's needing to move out of their home. I see so much of this generosity already within our church, and we can take pride in that while still striving to imitate God's generosity even more, including towards our own church. Consider this. Is it easier for you to give to the church or to someone in need? Do you tend to find one harder than the other? And why do you think that is? Do you struggle to see how supporting the church meets personal needs within our own congregation? Think about what it would mean if our staff, like Josh or Leslie, had to take part-time jobs to meet their family's needs. How would that impact that care and ministry that they provide to us as a church? While they would continue to minister regardless for free to us, and they've said that many times, consider the strain on them and their families and how that would ripple throughout our community if we had less of their time. Supporting them is our shared responsibility, just as they feel responsible for us. Now, consider how this church has positively impacted you and your friends. Multiply that across this whole congregation. Giving to the church is giving to somebody in need. Someone who is eager to follow Jesus but doesn't really know where to start. Someone who needs a friend who's going to ask them how they're really doing. Someone struggling to make new connections as an adult. Someone navigating a difficult marriage or grieving a loss. This church actively meets these kinds of needs and more. If you've experienced these blessings, how would you make them available to others? God calls us to be stewards of the resources he's entrusted us with. In many of Jesus' parables, he tells of someone who has great wealth, like a king, a master, or a rich man, who entrusts that wealth to his servants, like a portion of that wealth. The outcomes vary in these parables. Some servants invest and multiply what's given, while others hoard or waste it. These stories remind us that God wants us to use what we've been given wisely and purposefully. For his purposes. Storing up wealth for ourselves does not do good for others or God's kingdom. Instead, we should manage our resources with intention and care. A simple, practical way to do this is by keeping a budget and knowing what comes in and out so that we can plan to give generously. Take account of what you have so you can count on giving some away. It is wise and godly to be prudent in managing your finances, but hasty in your generosity. Each week, we're reminded of the opportunity to honor God and bless others by giving to DNC. I greatly appreciate the transparency that we've seen here today that our church has with our finances. There's an openness about it that invites all of us to see this as our collective responsibility. You get to see exactly where the money you put in goes. And I love that we have the opportunity to ask the staff more questions, to give suggestions. There's just a lot of transparency there. There are no secrets, except for maybe some of the charitable things that we do behind the scenes. But if this is your church, the goals that we've talked about today are also your goals. Let's invest in these together. And I'm personally excited about potentially having another female leader on our staff. We love what Josh and Ryan and Grant do, but we could use more women leaders. Amen? Yeah. Let's see that these women in this room, in this congregation right now, of all life stages, worth investing in. I hope that you see DNC as a whole worth investing in like I do. I hope you find it so worth investing in that eventually we can help give enough to plant another one for another city in need of a community like this. I hope that we treat these financial goals with the same priority as we would our own goals, our own emergency fund, our own travel budget, our own nest egg that we're building up for ourselves. May we all be prudent with our resources and hasty with our generosity. May God provide for us, ease our financial insecurities, and open our hands to give graciously as he does to us. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for our sermon podcast. We would love for you to join us on Sunday morning or in one of our small groups during the week, and you can get more information about that at dentonnorthchurch.com.